Welcome into the NFL Week 4 edition of the RotoWire Sports Gambling Podcast. We talk about gambling on the NFL. I am Nick Whalen, joined as I am every week by my man, John McKechnie. John, I don't think we're alone when we could say that we look back on Week 3 and it was carnage all over the place. Tough week for us in Circa Million. We saw a ton of survivor entries go down in Week 3, most of those being on the Jacksonville Jaguars or the Dallas Cowboys. Ravens, of course, lost straight up to the Indianapolis Colts. It was one of those weeks where, talking through all those games on the pod last week, doing the Circa video, we were kind of going back and forth, and that all these favorites are not going to cover. One or two of them aren't going to win outright. It felt like a guessing game, and boy, did we come out on the wrong side of that. We got to be upfront about it.
Yeah, we absolutely do. I went to the dentist yesterday, and that was more fun than Sunday as far as the betting record was concerned. I mean, it was rough for picks generally. Survivor, I went down with the Dallas ship, so now I'm all leery about using San Francisco this weekend against the Cardinals. Do we respect the Cardinals? TBD. But I think we know now that the Bears are the worst team, but they are playing a team that lost by 50 points this past weekend. So, I mean, there's some games in here that are really putting the old noggin in a pretzel.
Yeah, I think the Bears have the belt right now, but they have a chance to pass that off to the Denver Broncos this week. And there are certain games over the course of the NFL schedule. This feels like it doesn't really happen in other sports, probably just because it's so condensed, but there's like serendipitous matchups, right? Like I had not really looked at the Week 4 board until Sunday night, and in the wake of that, we had the Bears down 41-0 at one point. We had the Broncos getting 70 put on them. I actually read today that like the expected score in that game was like 78. Like it could have been worse, and it certainly felt that way watching it. It's like the Dolphins could have named their number in the second half. And then you look ahead to Week 4, and it's like, of course the Broncos are playing the Bears. Like, of course this is how it ends up. Like the two teams that are as down bad as it gets right now are playing each other. And that matchup to me is kind of reminiscent of how this week shapes up. We have one huge favorite in the 49ers. Like you mentioned, they are 14-point favorites at home against Arizona. Vegas isn't buying it. We'll talk about that game a little bit later. We got Chiefs-Jets. Chiefs are 9.5-point favorites. Would love for that number to hang on at 9.5 in Circa. And we got the Eagles as 8.5-point favorites over the Commanders. Other than that, you're seeing a lot of ones, a lot of 2.5s, some threes, some 3.5s. When I was writing my article earlier today, 11 of 16 games at that time had a spread of 3.5 points or less.
Yeah, so we're expecting a much tighter week in that regard, but there were the huge spreads last week, and only one of them covered, and a bunch of them lost outright. So this week really has some interesting matchups. I feel like this weekend superior to last as far as what watchability is concerned, and hopefully we are a few notches sharper this time around.
I think we will be. In terms of against the spread picks, I actually ended up okay. I had a 500 week. It felt worse than that. Like my pick'em league was a complete disaster. Took a couple of risks there. I thought the Falcons might win outright against Detroit. That was wrong. That did not happen. And of course, in another serendipitous matchup, we get Falcons-Jaguars in London this week. We'll dive in on that one in a bit. But let's talk about some of our favorite games on this slate. And some weeks you got so many games that you almost have to pare it down to try to narrow it down to 3 or 4. I was scratching and clawing just to find like 3 or 4 games that we really care about watching on Sunday.
Yeah, it's funky for sure, but I think the big headliner I would say for this weekend, we get a great Thursday night game as well, but Bills-Dolphins I think really is kind of at the center of everything for Sunday. The Dolphins get to take their show on the road to Buffalo. Buffalo has banked a couple of blowout wins over bad teams over these last couple of weeks. Miami is the talk of the fantasy community at this point, and we have Tua checking in as the newly crowned MVP favorite. We see the Dolphins favored to win the division now, if you're keeping track of those things. And the Bills, they probably are oddly enough feeling mildly disrespected going into this one just because of the amount of shine that's on the Dolphins right now. And the Dolphins, they're checking in as underdogs in this game, but the Bills probably still are able to play a bit of that disrespect angle as well.
Yeah, numbers at 2.5 on DraftKings. It's been bouncing between 2.5 and 3 all day. We'll see where that ultimately settles. I mean, the look ahead on this one, was 3, and it opened all the way back in the summer at 3.5. So yeah, I think you could play the disrespect angle a little bit for the Bills, especially just because of the singular result last week for the Dolphins. Meanwhile, the Bills have just rolled over their last 2 opponents in the Commanders and the Las Vegas Raiders. But I think there's still some lingering like wounds from that week 1 game against the Jets, where we saw Josh Allen turn the ball over 4 times. But I mean, the Bills have done everything they possibly could over the last 8 quarters to remind us that they are one of the best teams in the AFC. I saw a great stat earlier this week that Tua leads the NFL in terms of fastest time to throw. I mean, he's always gotten the ball out quickly, but it's at really an extreme rate so far through 3 games. He's also averaging more completed air yards per attempt than any other quarterback. So he's getting rid of it faster than everybody. He's also getting more air yards than anybody, which just speaks to how quickly these receivers are getting downfield and how well schemed they are.
Yeah, it helps to have a track team as your supporting cast, whether it's Tyreek Hill. Obviously, Jalen Waddle wasn't available this past weekend. Looks like he'll be good to go for this week. And in case people weren't aware, Raheem Mostert and Devin Achane, very fast as well. So I love the vision of this Miami team. It fits the Miami aesthetic so well. It's like Formula One on a football field. It's unreal. So fun. You can kind of get the sense of where I'm leading for this one. But yeah, I mean, like going back to your original point on the Bills and what they've done over these last couple of weeks, like there is still that stink on them from the Jets game because, that yes, they've taken care of business and banked a couple of blowout wins over bad teams, but have they really proven that they are, of that upper echelon yet this season? But I think Sunday is a huge proving ground for them in that regard.
Oh, no question about it. I mean, this is the game of the week. I don't even know what would be number 2. I think Chiefs-Jets, barring the Aaron Rodgers injury, that would have been a really fun one. But obviously that one, could get out of hand with Zach Wilson at quarterback. I mean, this is where all the eyeballs will be in the early window. I don't know where to go here, especially if the number's at 3. I'm not going to be using it in Circa this week. I mean, it's dangerous to kind of carry things over year to year, but the Bills do have that cachet, right? It's not like they were just some flash in the pan team last season. I mean, they've built, kind of 3 straight years here of being one of the Titans in the AFC, if not the NFL overall. So, I'm not saying I'm willing to just throw out what happened in week 1, but I think they built up enough cachet for me that I do give them the benefit of the doubt. And, this defense is running hot, right? And we could say, yeah, they played the Commanders and they played the Raiders, but I don't care who you play. You sack the quarterback 9 times. You force 4 turnovers. I mean, that was as dominant of a defensive performance as we've seen this season last week. And obviously, the Dolphins are a completely different animal, literally, than the Commanders. But I think Buffalo is going to be able to keep this close. I certainly don't think they get boat raced here. And the thing that I look for is, like, I think both of these teams can score quickly, right? Like, I think this will end up being a close game because if one team gets ahead by 10 or even 14 points, like, I don't see either of them just falling away. Like, they're both just going to keep going at it for 4 quarters.
Exactly. And that's why we see the tasty over under at 54.5. Like that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. You like the over on that?
I'll take it. I'll take the over.
Okay. All right, there we go.
I'm expecting fireworks. We got a beautiful day forecasted in Buffalo. Mid 70s, sunny, no rain. None of the issues that the Dolphins had to face when they went up to Buffalo like twice in a 3-week span late in the year. Last year with that game around Christmas, and then of course the early round playoff game as well. So conditions favorable, neutral even. It might be too balmy for the Buffalo Bills.
That's the thing. Yeah, I think if you're the Bills, you'd rather get this matchup in December than late September. No question about that. All right, let's go to. I put 4 games in the best of the weekend, and you mentioned one of them Thursday night. We are recording on Wednesday evening this week. In general, this pod will kind of move around. Sometimes it'll be Wednesdays, most of the time Thursdays. Occasionally we'll do a Friday morning, depending on scheduling. But because we're recording on Wednesday, that means we get to talk about Lions-Packers. Another really, really close game, I think, that we see here for the Green Bay Packers, who played 1-point games each of the last 2 weeks. They rally back, down 17-0, put up 18 in the fourth quarter to win at home against the New Orleans Saints. They are 1.5-point home dogs to the Detroit Lions. Total is at 46 in this game. Still players at large for the Green Bay Packers. We're not sure about Jair Alexander, Christian Watson, Aaron Jones. All 3 of those guys seem to be trending in the right direction. What we do know for Green Bay, John, is that they will not have David Bakhtiari, they will not have Devontae Campbell, and they will not have Elton Jenkins.
Yes, you're talking about 40% of the offensive line right there. That of course is an issue going up against this Lions front seven. An interesting tidbit that I'm sure a lot of our listeners have seen bandied about this week. This is the first time that the Lions have been favored in Green Bay when Green Bay actually had its starting quarterback healthy since 1986. So it's been a minute. Neither of us were around back then. That I got that stat from Ben Fox, and yeah. So this is an interesting sea change, but at the same time, I'm having a hard time going away from the Packers here. I've been very impressed by them. I would say relative to my expectations through 3 weeks. Obviously, that week 2 game in Atlanta did not go how it should have, or they kind of let down there at the end, but they sort of were able to rally in a huge, significant way that this past week where they scored all their points in the fourth quarter. Of course, Derek Carr getting injured in that game changes things to an extent, but I still feel like Thursday night in Lambeau, going up against the Lions, I am on the Packers here. I feel like that they're going to be able to exploit some of those weaknesses in Detroit's defense. Overall, again, the offensive line going to be a big factor there. But if they're able to do that, if they're able to get Christian Watson or Aaron Jones back, that also really bolsters the confidence even further.
PFF released their early season offensive line rankings earlier today. Green Bay was number 1 despite those injuries. So I don't necessarily worry about that. They've always been able to find really reliable depth late in the draft. So missing David Bakhtiari, missing Elton Jenkins, it's not ideal, but it hasn't really been the killer that you might think it would be for Green Bay so far. I mean, pass blocking especially has been rock solid. The running game has not been great, but I think some of that is to blame on A.J. Dillon, who is right near the bottom of the league. I think he's minus 58 yards below expected so far this season, which checks out, passes the eye test absolutely. If Aaron Jones plays, I like Green Bay, and I think we get a very close game. I think this line is spot on it. I think the Lions are rightfully favored here. Like you mentioned, first time in a very long time that they've been in this situation. Some of the trends do point toward Detroit, though. Lions 10-0 ATS in their last 10 NFC North games. They're 10-2 ATS in their last 12 games against Green Bay. So even if they're not winning a lot of those, that they have been able to keep it close. To me, it comes down to can the Lions get the ball moving on the ground here? Because I think we kind of know what this passing game is. Last week against Atlanta, they were able to survive without really being able to run the ball, without really getting Jahmyr Gibbs all that involved. I don't know that they'll be able to live that way every single week. And this Packers team is still evolving. I still don't feel like we have a great handle on it yet. At no point, especially once Rashid Shaheed took that return back for a touchdown last week. Green Bay had done nothing on offense through 3 quarters. The last thing you're expecting is Jordan Love in his first home start to lead that team to 18 points in the fourth quarter. But it feels like I kind of have to do a reevaluation on Love and this offense week to week.
Yeah, we definitely don't have a firm answer yet, but this will be a big opportunity for them on national television for the Jordan Love era to be established one way or the other, potentially. Mm-hmm. And anytime I envision this game, I envision the Packers winning this one close or at the very least staying within the number. So I do feel rather strongly that the Packers are going to be able to do this. Maybe I'm doubting the Lions a bit too much, but I'm still not fully sold yet. I know that they won kind of a who is who type of game last week against Atlanta, and they did so convincingly. I think you bring up a good point about the run game. We'll see if David Montgomery is going to be able to play through that quad injury that obviously kept him out this past weekend.
Yeah, 2.8 yards per play for the Atlanta Falcons last week, which I think says more about that passing game than anything else. Let's go to Ravens-Browns. This is definitely a game that we want to be keeping an eye on. Anytime we got AFC North versus AFC North, a real slobber knocker, John. I initially lean Browns here. There's some trends that certainly favor the Ravens. They are 19-3-1 against the spread in their last 23 games as an underdog. That's about as strong as it gets. They're 12-3 ATS in their last 15 against Cleveland. That's one that I almost kind of throw out, though, because how many of those games was Cleveland just a completely incompetent franchise? At least half of those. So I think you can only go so far back as far as evaluating personnel and looking at trends, that date back 7 or 8 years. Regardless, this is a game that, of course, has a low total. I think everybody knows that. 40.5 is the number. That's tied for the lowest total of the week with Bengals-Titans. You watch the Ravens as closely as anybody. We're seeing this number hang around. Browns 2.5, Browns 3, What's your initial read?
Well, as is tradition, the Ravens have a tome of
Every
an
year.
injury report.
Every year.
The funny thing is that they made it out of training camp reasonably unscathed, and then week one happened, and it's like, okay, all's right in the world again. But at the same time, Ronnie Stanley and Tyler Linderbaum were both practicing on Wednesday. That's significant. If you're an NFL injury report follower, any sort of participation on Wednesday is a great sign. Really, Friday's the money day, but things are looking good for those two. So the offensive line should be closer to full strength, which is very, very important in this matchup because Cleveland's defense, especially in the front seven, to this point has been unbelievable. The Ravens' backfield, though, is still pretty banged up. John Harbaugh kind of non-committal about Gus Edwards' status. We know that Justice Hill is dealing with the turf toe. They had to bring Kenyon Drake up from the practice squad last week. So they are hurt in the backfield. And for the Ravens, that is important. We haven't seen like a total shift away from the sort of Roman philosophy, Greg Roman philosophy that is not the Roman football philosophy of thousands of years ago, whatever that may have been. So that they're going to need to also get the passing game going a little bit more. I saw a graphic of Zay Jones's route trees. They are just having him turn right or turn left and head towards the sideline. They're not actually like getting him down the field. And what's funny about that is when they have done it, it's had a lot of success. In week one, he had a nice catch. And then in week two, best throw of Lamar's season, a 52-yard strike down the middle between two defenders to Zay Flowers. So they need to get that going a little bit. It'll be interesting to see if they're able to test that Brown secondary, which is in the Brown defense in general, which is fully healthy right now.
The Browns defense has faced one red zone possession through 3 games. If you're listening to this pod, you probably heard that stat already. And it came, after a fumble by their offense deep in their own territory. I mean, this defense has been as dominant as it gets. We could quibble about the opponents that they've faced so far. I think Tennessee was kind of walking into a buzzsaw last week, but it's been impressive, man. I'm sure you saw the clips of, Tennessee just kind of trying to shadow Myles Garrett with multiple tight ends, just following him wherever he is on the field. I mean, that's how much of a game wrecker he's been through these first 12 quarters. You mentioned the injuries on the Baltimore side. Like, to me, that's what's ultimately going to decide this. Like, I'm not putting anything in until later this week once we know how many of those guys are in for Baltimore. Good news on Linderbaum and Stanley, but we also didn't see Odell Beckham or Rashad Bateman practice on Wednesday. Every single running back on the active roster right now is banged up, which is an annual tradition as well for the Baltimore Ravens. And they have some guys banged up on the defense, in addition to all that. So I initially lean Browns here. I'm still wary of trusting Deshaun Watson. Like, I thought he played his best game in a Browns uniform last week. We're yet to see him string 2 games together at any point since coming to Cleveland.
Exactly. So, week 1, he looks good. Week 2, it's an absolute train wreck. Week 3, best we've seen. And week 4, TBD. But I feel like this is a week where we noticed Elijah Moore getting going a decent bit last week. Amari Cooper got his. And if Marlon Humphrey's still out, that's still a very suspect pass defense, in my opinion. So, Gardner Minshew was able to hit some throws on them. So, this could be this is a tricky spot for the Ravens. I know that the historical trends do kind of point towards them, and on the Browns end of that angle, the Browns are bad against the spread after a win, 1-7 against the spread after a win dating back to last year, and since 2021 they are 6-12 as favorites. So those are not great historical stats, but at the same time that it's hard to apply those, as you were saying, to Cleveland under its current iteration.
So if this number stays at 3, is it just a stay away for you? Like, if it got to Browns 3.5, I would jump on the Ravens. If it's Browns 2.5, I would take the Browns. But at 3, this just feels destined to be 17-14 or 2017 one way or the other.
Yeah, it's a stay away for the contest. If I had to have a lean and it stays at 3, I'm probably going the Browns. They're healthier. I feel like the talent is equal and they're at home. So I feel like a cover would be my expected outcome if it stayed at 3. But like you said, that push is certainly in the realm of possibilities if it sticks at this number.
All right, John. So the final game that I threw in the must-watch pile for this week, Broncos-Bears. It's just like watching a train wreck, right? This does not add up with the rest of the games that we're keeping a close eye on. But I'm excited for this. I'm legitimately excited to see how this game plays out. Both teams cornered at their lowest points. I think Chicago is a little bit more down bad as a franchise right now, which is saying a ton because this has just been a complete disaster for Denver, dating all the way back to the start of last season. I lean toward the Broncos. I don't think they're quite as decrepit on offense as the Bears are. The Broncos ironically lead the league in first quarter scoring right now. Like they've started fast in every game, and they even hung in with Miami for like 1.5 quarters. And then, obviously things went completely off the rails there. But the question to me is, how bad is the Denver defense? Like, how much do they give to this Bears offense? Because I think I trust the Bears less, but anything seems on the table right now with Denver.
It does. I can't make heads or tails of how bad this defense has gotten. Since last year, it was one of the best units in football. Again, the meme stat of if the Broncos were just able to average 18 points a game, their record would have been astronomically better. But yeah, basically. But now that is turned, that they are finding something on offense, but it seems to be at the cost of the defense. I don't think that Chicago's going to be able to do what Miami did, but I do wonder if this is the week where Justin Fields just kind of says F it and just starts running it a ton like we saw when the Bears were kind of at their nadir last season. I feel like it was the Patriots Monday night game where they kind of shocked the world. Definitely. That was
their last win.
That was. And that definitely knocked me out of Survivor. Now that I'm thinking on it, it's all coming back to me. But something along those lines is definitely possible. But, I mean, it just says everything about the Bears, that they're playing at home against a team that just lost by 50 points, and they are more than a field goal underdogs. That's the state of the Bears right now. So I think it is Broncos for me. I just have a little bit of that lingering concern about a crazy Justin Fields game against that defense. But if this goes reasonably according to plan, this is Denver's game.
I think it says a lot that we're both talking about the best case scenario for the Bears offense being Justin Fields just not listening to his coaches and doing his own thing. Like, does that apply? Is there another quarterback in the league where you could say that? Like, yeah, he just needs to say screw it and do his own thing, and that'll be better for the team. I mean, that's the state of the Bears for the Chicago Bears right now. So I'm with you. I don't think I'm going to play this game. If I did, it would be the Broncos. I actually do kind of like the over on 45.5. And I know that's a bit counterintuitive, especially on the Chicago side, but Bears have gone over in 11 of their last 14 games. They're 3-0 to the over already this season. Most of that is the opponents doing a lot of that work. But like I said, the Broncos offense has actually looked pretty reasonable. I think it's easy to pile on Russell Wilson, and he hasn't been great. He's been nothing close to what he was at his peak, but he's been better than last year. No question about that. They're actually hitting big plays. That was the one thing that they could not do through the air last season. And they have been able to do that. And I think if you could rip off big plays against some other teams, you should absolutely be able to do that against the Chicago Bears. Russell Wilson, over 1.5 passing touchdowns, by the way, is plus 110 this week if you're looking for a prop in that game. Let's move on to some of the other secondary games we'll be keeping an eye on. Vikings-Panthers is a fun one. This is another game where we have an over or an under that we want to play. We'll reveal that in a little bit. But yet again, a tough game to handicap here. The Minnesota Vikings are 4-point favorites. The 0-3 Minnesota Vikings, 4-point favorites on the road at Carolina. It does look like we will get Bryce Young back at quarterback for the Panthers. He was able to practice on Wednesday.
Okay, so I mean that almost makes me like Minnesota more in this spot. If it's Bryce Young out there as opposed to the Red Rifle, who if for all the super flex players out there, definitely delivered as a waiver wire pickup last week in Seattle. I think that comes back down to earth if Bryce Young is out there. Minnesota defensively has been a disaster thus far, and offensively they've been about where they were last year. This is tricky, but at the same time, I can't see this going any way other than the Vikings. I know it's hard to trust the Vikings generally from a betting perspective, and it's definitely hard to trust them on the road. But I think the Panthers, with a rookie quarterback this early in his career, coming off the injury, probably not even being at 100%, but still playing through it, that's enough for me to steer me away from Carolina. I'm not sure if I'm using this one either, but I'm on the Vikings here. But one quick question here that we did get in the chat. We got a super chat from our guy Tyler. So new feature now that the RotoWire YouTube is doing numbers, we can do
I love that.
super
Thank
chats. Yes. So Tyler, great viewer, listener, always chimes in on the Thursday show as well. So appreciate it, Tyler, tuning in all the time. We have a quarterback quandary here. Would you start Jared Goff, Joe Burrow, or Justin Fields this week?
Jared Goff, Joe Burrow, or Justin Fields. Man, I think I would go Goff or Burrow. It depends entirely how much you think Joe Burrow will hold up. I bet against the Bengals on Monday because I didn't think Joe Burrow would make it through that game. He ultimately did. And, I think even as limited as he was, especially early on, I mean, they were doing everything they could for him to just basically catch the ball and immediately throw it. I think they showed that they can, that they can utilize that game plan effectively. Now, part of that was going up against the Rams defense, which was a little overmatched. And, I also think, the way that they use Jamar Chase is going to unlock some things for this offense. T. Higgins had a terrible game, had a couple big drops. I think that offensive game could have looked a little bit better for Cincinnati. So, it's a tough assumption to make. It's a caveat that I wish we didn't have to throw out, but I think you got to go with Joe Burrow if you think he's making it through this game.
Right. So therein lies the tricky part because you have Goff leading us off tomorrow night. So you kind of have to make this decision with Thursday in mind because you don't want to put yourself in that position where you're picking between Burrow and Fields. My lean is to just go Goff. We have Goff as QB 8 this week over on the RotoWire QB rankings. Burrow down at 11 and Fields all the way down at 19. I tend to agree with those rankings here. So I think the safe play, give it one more week with Burrow. It's a bit of a tougher defense kind of that he's going up against. So I will go with Goff. This isn't a Lambeau game in the cold weather, so I think Goff will be fine. Yeah. So give me Goff here.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Yeah, it's close to me, and I have no problem going with Jared Goff over Burrow, especially if you're a little bit worried about that calf. Let's talk Jags-Falcons. This is the early morning game for those of us in the United States. 8:30 a.m. for me. That'll be 9:30 for you, John, out in the Eastern time zone. I could go on and on about this Jags team, and I have gone on and on the Monday pod and on the radio for the last few days. Just an unbelievable no-show against Houston. I know if you dig into some of the underlying stats, it wasn't as big of a blowout as it should have been. The Jags have had issues with drops. They continue to make everything as difficult as possible within this offense. The third and fourth downs continue to be a massive, massive issue every single week for the Jags. They are 12 of 43 converting third and fourth downs this season. But, you allow a fullback to return a kickoff for a touchdown. You miss an easy kick. You get one blocked. You got Jamal Agnew fumbling deep in Texans territory. Like everything that could have gone wrong for the Jags went wrong in that game. But you also look back to how the offense played against Kansas City. It wasn't good. The offense didn't look all that great for 3 quarters against the Colts in week 1 either. So I'm kind of stuck between, my preseason beliefs on how good this Jags offense could be and then what we've seen for the majority of this season, which has just been wholly unimpressive.
Right. And I think going to London, even if there's, something of a Jags home field advantage in that sense, all of that you're going up against a Falcons defense that I think is at least respectable. I have the long-term optimism for the Jaguars here. Do you have any insight as to where in the season last year things kind of started to click? The Jaguars had that early season blowout win over the Chargers, and then they seemed to kind of go to sleep offensively for a little while and really picked it up later in the year. So is this something where we might be a few weeks away from seeing the fully fledged Jaguars attack?
I'm really not sure, man. It feels like a different situation. I mean, last year they were 2-1. You mentioned that Chargers game. That was also the week after Justin Herbert got banged up, and he was extremely limited in that one. Like, I don't think we got a real representative sample of what the Chargers were in that game, and they immediately lost 5 in a row right after that, including, a really ugly loss to the Houston Texans. It really wasn't until like week 12 or 13 when they got things turned around. I mean, they started the winning streak in week 14 against Tennessee. So, this was a straight up bad team for over half of last season. They were 2-6 at one point. So I don't know that we can use that as too much of a roadmap. I mean, I do think the saving grace, like having watched all of these Jaguars snaps through 3 weeks, is that Trevor Lawrence is not the issue. I'm kind of starting to come down on the the play calling is the problem. I thought the play calling was really rough through week 1 and parts of week 2, but a lot of just weird bounces didn't go their way last week. I mentioned the turnovers, the fumble. Lawrence had a pick. The Jaguars have lost 15 expected points already this season, just due to drops, and that's not counting like the 5 times where they've had a receiver not get his feet down on the sideline or in the end zone. Like just straight up drops have cost them 2+ touchdowns already this season. So I think a lot of those numbers are still encouraging if you're on the Jaguars. You think at some point some of those kind of luck type of stats are going to turn their way, but I also don't love this matchup for them. I know there is kind of a slight quote unquote home field advantage for the Jags when they go to London, but playing a team like the Falcons that can control the ball on the ground, I still don't trust this Jags defense really at all. They've been like the worst pass rush in the NFL so far this season. They'll be without their nose tackle, Davon Hamilton, this week as well. That's kind of a worst case scenario going up against Atlanta. I worry about this game completely. If the offense is not firing on all cylinders, I think this could be one of those games. Atlanta's had a couple already where you look back and say, wow, Atlanta ran 65 plays and the Jags somehow only ran 48.
Yeah, they definitely can get you in that sort of like alligator death roll type of thing and just drag you down. Well so you definitely want to avoid that. You would think a team from Florida would be adept around an alligator, but we're talking about Falcons all over the place here. However, I think when it all comes down to it for this, I will say that this is the week that the Jags offense wakes up a little bit, and the Falcons, the way that they're built, they can't play from behind. So if the Jags are able to start hot, if the script works and you kind of are able to dodge in a sense the rest of Press Taylor's shortcomings, and if he scripts it up good, then I think the Jags get out ahead early and keep their foot on the gas. And if you make Desmond Ridder beat you, you win the game. Basically, is the general trend that I'm picking up from this Atlanta team.
Yeah, all I want to see from the Jags is just some easy plays. Everything has been so difficult. The last week's game just felt like a series of like 3rd and 5s over and over and over. And you watch so many other teams around the league, and it's like Tyreek Hill is somehow just running wide open 5 times per game, and the Jaguars are some of the drops are on Ridley. The 30-yard touchdown that he dropped early in the game, I thought kind of set the tone for this offense. But a lot of them, you're asking a receiver to catch the ball in traffic. He's got 2 guys about to hit him. He's got to get right to the ground. Like there's a lot of tight throws, a lot of difficult throws, and for the most part, Lawrence is making them. But the Jags just don't. There's no layups in this offense, and that to me is what's concerning. So this is another game where the number is sitting right at 3. Not really a play for me right now. I think if it were to go to 2.5, yeah, I'd like the Jags. If it would go to 3.5, I would be on Atlanta. But I think I give a slight lean toward the Atlanta Falcons right now. I need the Jags to prove something before we go back to that well. No question about that. Steelers-Texans. This feels like a matchup of like teams that have never played. Like I can't even picture the Steelers and the Texans being on the same field. I know it's happened before plenty of times, but it's just one that we don't see very often. Steelers 3-point favorites on the road at the red hot Texans.
Oof. This should be an interesting one. You wouldn't have really circled this one coming into the year if you're looking at the week 4 NFL slate, but here we are. We have a Texans team that just seems to be kind of cool with going a college offense route. They're just letting CJ Stroud drop back, and Tank Dell has obviously exceeded expectations so far. And Nico Collins has been solid. They still have the carcass of Robert Woods running around there occasionally. But regardless, I mean, Stroud is definitely making it work so far. But I do wonder this week, again, when we talk about the Texans at this stage, offensive line, you get concerned about them. And I think whereas the Jaguars couldn't really force the issue in that sense last week, we know that the Steelers absolutely can. I mean, the Steelers were folding up Jimmy Garoppolo like a cheap suit most of the night on Sunday. We definitely saw that against the Browns the week prior. So I think that this is another spot where that Texans offensive line ends up being their undoing. And I feel like Stroud is not a quarterback that I look at and says that he excels under pressure, always had the clean pockets at Ohio State. Definitely hasn't had that to this point in Houston, but I think Watt, Highsmith and company, like they might just kind of shut this Houston passing attack down before it can get off the ground.
Yeah, I'm of the same line of thinking here. And by the way, Houston won 15-1 straight up in its last 17 home games. I know this is a new era of Texans football, but that is concerning. I don't think you can skate by with this offensive line in as bad a shape as it is for 2 straight weeks. You can get away with it against a terrible pass rush like the Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't think you could do that against TJ Watt and the Steelers. So I'm with you. A bit of an uncomfortable number, somewhat of a surprising spread given how Pittsburgh has looked. But I think a lot of people banking on that Steelers defense. And to me, that's the right side of this one. Total, by the way, sitting at 42.5.
The action's interesting too. Like 57% of the handle is on Houston. Actually, when Pittsburgh is usually like the public team other than the Cowboys.
Interesting. All right, let's rip through some of these games. We'll go through the rest of the noon games, get to the afternoon slate, and then hit Sunday and Monday night. We're mercifully back down to just one Monday night game this week. Rams-Colts. John, a sneaky, interesting game. Maybe I should have bumped this one up into tier 2 this week. Rams, 1-point favorites on the road. Does sound like we will get Anthony Richardson back for the Indianapolis Colts. And I kind of feel the same way about the Colts as I do with the Carolina Panthers, where it's a slight downgrade for me going from Gardner Minshew to Anthony Richardson. And we kind of said the same thing on the pod last week, right? Like, nobody's questioning that Anthony Richardson is the future. He's looked great on the ground, but he also has not completed a pass for more than 20 yards on the season. It's kind of a completely different offensive scheme for the Colts going from Minshew back to Richardson.
Right. So that of course is a big TBD as far as when Richardson's going to start connecting down the field. But Indianapolis doesn't have bad receivers. They're just not star receivers. Like Michael Pittman, very solid player. Alec Pierce, I think, is someone who's underrated, and Josh Downs looks like he's coming on a little bit as well with the 12 targets last week. We'll have to see. And I guess it applies more to the fantasy lens that, how this offense recalibrates it when Richardson goes back into those target numbers, stay up. And does the Indianapolis just kind of offensive philosophy shift one way or the other? I don't know if they have the luxury of really leaning super hard on the running back core. I mean, I know Zach Moss had the good game last week, but really if you this is, a hindsight type of takeaway, but if you went and removed Zach Moss's 4 best carries last week, he wasn't really doing anything. So it was either a busted play or he was getting stuffed. So that's something for the Rams to account for, certainly. But I think in the end, I mean, we saw the Bengals be able to move the ball on the ground a bit against the Rams last week, and it had been kind of a moribund run game to that point in the season. So maybe the Richardson plug-in is something that can actually ultimately exploit some weaknesses in this Rams defense. And Indianapolis is at home in this spot. I'm kind of on Indy here. I'm not super strong on it, but I like them as just a narrow favorite at home against a Rams team that we saw. We're starting to see where not having Cooper Kupp in a legitimate run game is probably going to be something that keeps a pretty serious lid on them for the foreseeable future here.
Yeah, we saw the limitations of that receiving core multiple times on Monday night. The Rams were able to really hit a handful of big plays through the air on that Cincinnati secondary, but every time they got like inside the 15-yard line, they just had no answers. I mean, I don't think they really fully trust Kyron Williams, and for good reason. I don't think they trust that offensive line, and you just don't really have red zone weapons right now without Cooper Kupp. It's like you're trying to fit balls into windows to Tutu Atwell in the back of the end zone. Like that's not going to go well. So yeah, this one to me is really, really tough. Coming into the year, I think I would have leaned Rams. Obviously, things have devolved with Cooper Kupp, and I think the way that offense looked for the most part, they were 1 of 11 on third downs on Monday night. Scares me a little bit here. So this one is probably going to be a stay away in the Circa contest. Bucs-Saints, John. These games are always fun every single year. It's the Mike Evans, Marshawn Lattimore fight night. I don't even know. This is like their 8th battle over the last few years. Something's going to happen at some point here. Saints are 3-point favorites. We think it'll be Jameis Winston under center for New Orleans. Derek Carr, of course, getting hurt in that Green Bay game last week. Buccaneers, meanwhile, they got eagled. They got eagled on Monday night. There's no other way to say it. I actually didn't even think Tampa played that badly. But we saw the Eagles' offensive line just dominate the Bucs D line.
Right, exactly, and that's a key thing here because that was obviously Tampa Bay's first loss, and the Philly offensive line, again, incredible. A lot of tush push or the brotherly shove discourse on the Twitter sphere over the last couple of days. But John Sigler, who covers the Saints, great beat writer for them, noted that Ryan Ramczyk, I think Eric McCoy it was, and one other of their offensive linemen were like near the absolute bottom in the PFF grades for last week's game against the Packers. So that offensive line in and of itself is not going to do anything close to what Philadelphia was able to establish. So I think that's something. It's interesting that, the Saints kind of have and I guess a lot of this had to do with Drew Brees being the quarterback, but you'd think that it's a really tough place to go in and cover. But I believe the Buccaneers are actually 6-5 in the last 11 against the spread in the Caesars Superdome now. So this is anyone's game. We got Jameis revenge game part whatever at this point, and Baker Mayfield just on a permanent revenge tour against anybody. I'm taking the points here. I think I'm gonna stick with the Buccaneers. I thought that they've looked overall much better than I expected. I know last week's game it is what it was, but it was against the Eagles, so I'm going to give them a bit of a break here, and I think the Tampa Bay can take the show on the road and make this one close.
Yeah, I'm with you. I would take either side getting the points here. This game's in New Orleans. I think it's really, really close. We just haven't seen a whole lot of Jameis in the last calendar year. I will be looking at Jameis interception props. Once those are posted later this week, you can get Baker Mayfield over 0.5 picks at -125 right now at the DraftKings Sportsbook. I need to find a parlay where they both throw multiple picks.
Yes, keep me posted on where you can find that, because I want to tail that.
Yeah, I do like the under here as well, 40.5. New Orleans 3-0 to the under so far this season. Commanders, Eagles. Philly, 8.5-point favorites at home. Commanders kind of got their bubble burst last week against the Buffalo Bills. I do think that game, it was a lot more competitive in the first half than the final score would indicate, but the wheels completely came off for Washington in that second half. And I know it's a short week for Philly, but they're at home here. They got tripped up in the spot by the Commanders, around midseason last year. I feel like the Eagles are trending in the right direction, right? We had a few questions about this offense and even the secondary through the first 2 weeks of the season. But what we saw on Monday, that was a lot more reminiscent of the Philadelphia Eagles from last season. And Jalen Hurts threw 2 picks. A.J. Brown had some huge drops. Not everything went right for the Eagles in that game. They still win very comfortably over a Buccaneers team that I think is probably a little bit better than the Commanders.
Yeah, so this one to me just screams blowout as far as I can tell. I think Philadelphia, again, we still haven't seen their full form at this point, but they're at home. The Commanders licking their wounds. They don't seem to have an offensive line that has much in the way of cohesiveness. That's really, really bad news for Sam Howell here. And we saw things go pretty awry for him last week against that tough Bills pass rush. And I think the Eagles is even better. And you have disruptive forces in the middle, like Jalen Carter blowing up the middle of the line. So this is just going to be a really long day for Sam Howell. And I think even if the Eagles play a B- game, they can get the cover here.
Yeah, I think you said it very well. Bengals-Titans. This one's in Tennessee. Bengals, 2.5-point favorites coming off of that win at home over the Rams on Monday night. We talked about this one a little bit earlier when we were tackling the Joe Burrow fantasy question. If you could guarantee me that Joe Burrow makes it through this game, I absolutely love Bengals -2.5. Titans are kind of on the ropes here. I actually thought the Titans would be a little bit more live as a dog last week against the Cleveland Browns. Very discouraging performance for that offense. The running game has been disastrous through 3 weeks for Tennessee. We knew this offensive line would be shaky. I think I'm on the Bengals here at 2.5, John.
I am too. Even if, it's kind of a shaky performance from this Bengals offense, and that's not even a guarantee. Joe Mixon got going pretty good last week, and of course, Jamar Chase as well. So they keep Burrow upright. Things are looking good for them. But regardless of that, like you said, Tennessee pretty much unable to run the ball. I fear that the cliff has come for Derrick Henry. And, when you're a Titans team that has built the entire offense around him and he can't do what he's supposed to, how do you expect poor Ryan Tannehill to do anything? And that offensive line, I mean, the Rams one is bad. The Titans one is right there, if not worse. And we saw Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard just eating Matthew Stafford's lunch or dinner, I suppose, on Monday night. So I'm seeing a lot of similarities here. I'm seeing the edges from Cincinnati just come in and just kind of dominate and shut things down on the Tennessee side. And then straight comment about the Cincy defense. That Daxton Hill guy looks like he's starting to turn into a little something. Justice Hill's brother. Did you know?
I did not know that. There we go.
Mm-hmm.
I had no idea. I'm going to need a second to collect myself after receiving that information. The one pushback that I do have here about Derrick Henry is we were having this exact conversation this time last year when he was getting stuffed the first 3 games of the year. He looked bad against the Giants, looked terrible against the Buffalo Bills, looked bad against a really, really rough Las Vegas Raiders defense. What did he do after that? 5 straight 100-yard games starting in week 4. So I'm not fully jumping off of Derrick Henry yet, but it's going to be a tall task, I think, doing that against the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, if Joe Burrow makes it through this game, if you're confident in that, give me the Bengals -2.5 on the road. Raiders-Chargers as we move into the late window on Sunday. Chargers 5.5-point favorites. 48.5 is the total here, John. I almost just want to swear off betting the Chargers at all. Like, it's just not a healthy thing to do. You should have to sign a waiver wherever you're placing a Chargers bet, but before you sign up for, whatever is coming your way. Does this number make sense to you? Like, how big of a deal is losing Mike Williams for this offense?
Probably not very. I think that Keenan Allen, as long as he stays healthy, that's still an offense that's going to be able to function very well. I hope Keenan Allen has begun hydrating because he's probably looking at 15, 20 targets again this week. Josh Palmer, not an unbelievable talent by any means, but I think he's serviceable, clearly has some semblance of a connection with Justin Herbert, and we're still waiting for Quentin Johnston to kind of get himself established. Obviously, with Mike Williams being out, that opens that door. If Eckler, I believe he was able to practice on Wednesday. If he's back, that's absolutely huge for the Chargers. And as much as I am loath to bet the Chargers, so totally agree with you there, it changes a little bit when it's the Raiders. I mean, the Josh McDaniels field goal saga on Sunday night was something to behold. He's a bozo, and so even though Staley is also a bozo, I think in a weird way, I think McDaniels is like a more damaging bozo, and therefore, give me the Chargers to cover this number. It's you don't feel good trusting the Chargers with like barely a field goal. 5 points makes you feel a little worse, but at the same time, I'm just going to side with the Chargers bolt up.
Sounds like we got a good old fashioned bozo off on our hands out in LA this weekend. I'm with you. I'm on the Chargers here. Again, it's just the number could be whatever. I mean, the Chargers could be like +20 in this game, and I'd still be like, I don't know. There's just something about this. If Eckler plays, I feel a lot better about it. He did practice on Wednesday, was limited, so we'll see. I don't think that's a home run quite yet that he's back. They got a couple injuries on the offensive line as well. Rashawn Slater, Corey Linsley. We got to keep an eye on those. But yeah, this Raiders team, we talked about it in the preseason. Like they feel like they're not quite on like implosion watch, but if they get blown out in this game, like we've already seen a couple times, Devontae Adams after games just being like, "Hey man, this is not what I signed up for. Like this franchise is going in the wrong direction." And I think a couple more games like that, and I think Josh McDaniels kind of risks losing this team. So yeah, we'll see. I'm with you on the Chargers, 5.5. I think it's a friendly enough number, and I think if the Chargers can put together another competent offensive game, they will be just fine. Patriots-Cowboys. Really fun one in the late window. Cowboys, they were 7-point favorites for most of the day. That number, though, has shrunk a little bit, John. They are now 6.5-point favorites at home. Total is up at 43.
So I'm all about the Cowboys this week. I don't want to give away too much, but I'm a big believer in theirs for this matchup. Dallas, I know that they blew it last week. I'm going to give them a break. I don't know. Maybe they're just having too much fun out in Arizona. They were overlooking their opponent, clearly just put exactly. And, I got the golf plug now, so, I mean, I totally get it. But Dallas 9-1 against the spread after a loss dating back to 2021. And coincidentally, the Patriots are just 5-12 against the spread as a dog in that same time frame. So that seems to line up pretty well here. And I think the Cowboys are going to be able to respond, shake last week's game off, and kind of just reestablish themselves as one of the favorites in the NFC and a potential Super Bowl contender. I toss last week's game out almost completely. And the Patriots, congratulations, you beat Zach Wilson. So I like the Cowboys here, and I think that this one actually could get kind of ugly.
Beat Zach Wilson and gave Zach Wilson a number of chances to win that game at the end that, maybe any other quarterback goes down and ends up producing a different result. Dallas 9-1 ATS after a loss over the last 2 seasons. So some trends pointing in that direction. Cardinals 49ers, John, biggest number on the board this week, 49ers 14-point favorites.
Let's have you take it away, man. I feel like I'm taking up too much of the air. I want some sharp Whalen discussion here. What do you got for this one?
The Cardinals have put me in a pretzel through 3 weeks. I thought last week would be the comeuppance week for them. They can't keep getting away with this game, and now it feels like maybe this is the week. And like I'm really hesitant to jump off of, my take that the Cardinals are the least talented team in the NFL. I mean, you got to tip your cap to head coach Nathan Fielder for the job that he's done through these first 3 weeks.
The plan.
Yeah, right. The plan is to beat the Cowboys outright, apparently. It's just they've started strong in all 3 games, and they've wilted in 2 of those. They kind of kept their foot on the gas to some degree against Dallas. You look at some of the deeper numbers in that game. I mean, Dallas was moving the ball. Like that game, I think was similar to Jags-Texans in a lot of ways, where Dallas just kind of beat itself after falling behind early. I just don't think the 49ers let that happen, right? Like you've seen it 3 times already. And that was my case for the Cowboys was, all right, we saw Arizona sneak up on the Commanders. We saw them sneak up on the Giants. How do you let that happen? And then it happened. So I don't want to jump off and suddenly be like, all right, well, I guess the Cardinals are just a good team that we have to reckon with, but they're 3-0 against the spread. They're one of only 3 teams to be able to say that through 3 weeks. But the 49ers to me are the team above even, a team like Kansas City, where I just feel like those letdowns are so few and far between. They're so prepared. They're so solid. There's just not a weakness that you really worry about a team like the Cardinals exploiting on this defense. And I totally get, some people see 14 and they just default to that. They're like, it's too high. I don't care what the team is. I'm never going to take a team minus 14. I'm on the 49ers here. I had to make a call in staff picks earlier today. I don't feel great about it. It's a high number. We saw the Rams pull off a little backdoor cover on the Niners a couple of weeks ago. That could certainly be the case here. But I think the Cardinals have given us too many warnings where the 49ers just will not be caught off guard at home.
No, they won't. And I think bottom line, Niners probably the best team in football, at least right now. So them well rested coming off the mini bye, having played last Thursday night. All of that just steers me in their direction. And you wonder if the Cardinals maybe get too big for their britches after knocking off the Cowboys and come in all proud and cocky and get knocked down.
All right, Chiefs-Jets, second highest number on the board this week. Chiefs 9.5-point favorites on the road. Hoping and praying, John, that this number hangs on at 9.5 because I will be all over the Chiefs at that number. I mean, still have some questions about the offense. I don't think, playing the Division I AA Chicago Bears necessarily cures all evils, but Travis Kelce continues to get healthier week to week. I think this defense is probably the best that they've had in the Mahomes era. I don't think the Jets are going to be able to do a whole lot offensively in this game. That's not a hot take, but I also think the Jets are teetering on the edge here, and if Zach Wilson comes out and looks terrible, which in all likelihood he will, history strongly suggests that he will play very badly in this game. The whole lose the locker room thing, it's such a trope. It's not really something that you could put into statistical terms, but nobody's happy on this Jets team. And you're never going to suggest that, players are just going to give up or anything like that, but you can sense it already. Like at the end of that game last week, offensive players, defensive players, they just don't feel good about the direction this team is heading. I wouldn't be surprised if we see Trevor Siemian at some point in this game, but if you're giving me the Chiefs and you're giving me, less than 10 points, I'm going to take it.
Even Robert Saleh, who's been trying to hold the line as hard as possible, I imagine coming down from the front office and everything to just be like, Zach's our guy. And even that stance is softening for him, despite being instructed otherwise. So, I mean, that's how bad it is with Wilson right now. He's just not cut out for this. I feel kind of bad for him in a way, but I mean, I think Patrick Mahomes and company coming into town is no way to turn things around. And like you said, I think that this could be a spot where the Chiefs get up 10 early and things just really, really quickly disintegrate on the Jets side. And, the defense, which is the only thing that they can hang their hat on, if they get a little bit of quit in them, they get some big plays dropped on them, and then, all of a sudden they got to go right back out after a third consecutive 3-and-out or something. Like this could be disaster territory. So I like your call there at 9.5, especially, so that gives a little bit of cushion off that 10. I'm liking where your head's at with the Chiefs.
Yeah, I want to warn everybody listening right now, like, be sure to clip this when I look stupid on Monday morning. But I don't think the Jets are capable of a backdoor cover. That's the thing. It's like all the Chiefs have to do is at some point get up by more than 10. Like, I don't worry about the Jets, putting up 15 points in the fourth quarter, and all of a sudden, a 20-point game becomes a 7-point game or something like that. Like, I think if the Chiefs could just do what they do through 3 quarters and, just kind of sit on that lead, they'll be just fine. Like, you're not really worried about Zach Wilson, like, throwing the Jets back into that game. And again, so many times over the years, we've talked about, it's the Chiefs offense, Mahomes, Kelsey. It's like the Chiefs defense has buoyed this team so far. Like that's the reason right now that they're 2-1 and should be 3-0. It's been this defense. So I don't really think that there's any real liability on that side of the ball. So Chiefs minus 9.5. That's our play there. That brings us to Monday night, John. Seahawks and Giants. New York Giants, 1-point favorites at home. Total sitting all the way up at 47. That is one of the highest of the week. My brain says to go Seattle here. Am I too quick on that?
I'm just wondering how the Giants are favored in a game against a competent, maybe even good Seattle team. I don't get it. There's no real like home field advantage to speak of. I think everyone is already like down on the Giants. It's
just like a general like angry atmosphere.
Yes, it's not good. And I know the the Seahawks have to go across the country, long trip, but you get the extra day for it. So you're not worried about like the body clock issue like you would if this was a 1:00 Eastern game. Seattle's just better, and they're going to win this game, and they only have to do so by 2 points. Give me the Seahawks.
Especially if Saquon Barkley doesn't play. That's the caveat for me. If Saquon plays, then you could see this Giants offense getting some things going. We saw it in the second half against Arizona a couple of weeks ago. We also saw the Giants do nothing on offense without Saquon. Granted, against the 49ers, not the best sample, but I'm with you on Seattle. I think they've shown the last 2 weeks they could put up points. They could do it against a Giants defense that is average at best, a defensive line that's been really disappointing so far, and a Giants offensive line that has really struggled. So I think there's some advantages on the defensive side of the ball for Seattle as well. We are brought to you by Circa. We love Circa. We always stay at Circa when we go out for the annual Vegas trip, and it's football season at Circa Resort and Casino in Las Vegas, featuring the best pool in history, Stadium Swim. 3 levels, 6 pools, and a 143-foot diagonal screen. Stadium Swim is America's favorite place to watch football. They play every game from college to the pros, and you can catch all the action poolside from a variety of seating options, including cozy daybeds and private temperature-controlled cabanas. Stadium Swim, located at Circa Resort and Casino. It's open 365 days a year, all sports, all seasons. You can book today at circalasvegas.com. That is circalasvegas.com. All right, John, you know the drill here. Let's talk a little Survivor. We'll hand out our picks of the week, and then we will be out of here. Big-time carnage in Circa Survivor and just about every Survivor league that anybody played in week 3. We saw over 40% of entries go down with the Jaguars, another 10+% with the Baltimore Ravens. If you took the Chiefs, congratulations. If you sided with the 49ers, the Seahawks, the Dolphins, any of those, you're safe. The thing is, in Circa, you got to save teams for Thanksgiving. You got to save teams for Christmas. But in most Survivor weeks or most Survivor leagues, you don't need to worry about that. So where do you lean this week? To me, there are 2 to 3 pretty obvious picks. After that, it's a little bleak.
One thing that I always think about when we talk about Circa Survivor, were you aware that there's a screamo band called Circa Survive?
I was not aware of that. No, I don't really know any screamo bands, let alone that one.
That maybe like 3 of our listeners. I think our guy Shannon will know what I'm talking about. But beyond that, sorry everybody. But when it comes to Survivor this week, I still have the 49ers available. I don't see how I can go against that. Last week was obviously disconcerting for those who back the big numbers and everything like that. But if you're in a rebuy league or multiple strike league or anything like that, and you still have the 49ers available, or if you just have simply not screwed up to this point in the season, I don't know how you don't go with the 49ers here. And the pot odds, I'm sure, are going to be pretty crazy. So that therein lies, the case to be made for Philadelphia or Kansas City. But I think the Niners are leaps and bounds ahead of everyone. But again, when you're in a big contest like this, where you do have to consider some game theory, maybe you would consider the Eagles instead. But for me, it's the Niners, and I gotta be doing a fair amount of just hand wringing to move off of that.
Yeah, I think, one way to look at it, especially if you're not too worried about saving teams for certain weeks, which, most people aren't, you just got to survive at this point. There's no other way to put it, right? I mean, you see the carnage every single week. You kind of face some of those tough decisions when you get there later in the year. It is tough, though, because I think, like you said, San Francisco, KC, and Philly, those are the big three this week, and those are maybe the three best teams in the league that you would prefer to save if you could. So I think if you're looking away from those three, I would consider Dallas. Obviously, that looks a little shakier now, but 6.5 point favorites at home against New England. They're on kind of a tier 2 for me. If you want to dip into the sicko tier, you could go Chargers over the Raiders. You could go Pittsburgh over the Texans. If you really want to do it, John, now might be the time to burn the Denver Broncos.
Wow, that would be putting it on the table. But I would respect any Survivor entry that sees 70-20 and says they're my Survivor team next week.
All right, let's get to parlays of the week. I got a teaser to throw at you. Then we'll hand out our locks. I'm usually just throwing out these really boring parlays. We're taking like big favorites, or maybe we'll tie in a total every now and then. That's boring. I am presenting this week the Nick Whalen Insanity Parlay, presented by Four Loco, as well as Marlboro. We're taking the Broncos, the Vikings, and the Chargers, the three most chaotic teams in the NFL, to cover. That gets you to plus 624 at DraftKings.
I love it. And for the endorsements you got for that one, just phenomenal. I don't, do I see where this gets blown up? I do not, because I'm with you on each of those. Yes. So, I mean, I guess maybe in the future, since it is Four Loco, get four teams in there, but that's editorial. We can workshop that backstage, but into it. Mine is more of like the John's Parlay, brought to you by Fiber One Cereals. Not all that exciting, but I think it'll get the job done here. Keep you regular. Give me the Packers to cover the spread, 1.5. So start us off on Thursday night. We got the Dolphins +3 and the Vikings -3.5. That gets you about 6-1 at most sports books. So that's mine. And then if you wanted to add in a fourth leg to really ham it up a little bit, I would take the Raiders Chargers over.
Ooh, okay, that spices it up a little bit. I think outside of that's presented by just like white pieces of paper, or like I don't even know, like Elmer's glue parlay of the week. I'm going to give you a 7-point teaser here, John. We are going to tease the Kansas City Chiefs down to -2.5 against the Jets. We're going to tease the Eagles down to 1.5 against the Commanders. And we are going to tease the Tampa Bay Buccaneers up to 10.5. That number, as we speak, has moved from 3 to 3.5. I want to get that over the key number of 10. So Chiefs -2.5, Eagles -1.5. Tampa just has to lose by less than 11 points. And there we go. So that gets you to +130. Nothing super exciting there. It's not exactly the Insanity Four Loco parlay, but if you want to play it a little bit safer, I do like those teaser options this week. Give me your one against the spread lock of the week, John.
It's got to be the Dallas Cowboys. The historical trends point in that direction. I think that the Patriots are altogether not an excellent team. I think that their defense is good, but I think that the Cowboys offense is better. And frankly, there's just very little ways in which the Patriots are going to be able to hang with the Cowboys over the course of 60 minutes. I think that offense is going to fall apart. I think we're going to see some more turnovers than we've seen over the last few weeks from the Patriots. I see some more mistakes there. It's on the road. Give me the Cowboys. And again, with it being 6.5, I love that.
I thought about that one. I need to see some clarity on the offensive line. They have a ton of offensive linemen banged up. Not necessarily sure it matters with the overall talent difference, but still respect the hell out of that pick, John. I'm going with the Chiefs. I know it's a big number. This is just quite simply a vote of confidence against Zach Wilson, or I guess a vote of no confidence in Zach Wilson. Again, love this staying under 10. If you can get it at 9.5, lock that in. We are rolling with the Kansas City Chiefs as our lock of the week. You're going Dallas Cowboys -6.5 against the New England Patriots. John, fun time as always. I know you're heading out to Florida for the weekend, so enjoy that. I know you'll be catching all the games. You can keep an eye out for our Circa picks. Those will be broadcast live on YouTube tomorrow afternoon. Check out the RotoWire YouTube channels. We just launched an NBA channel as well. If you're a bit of a round ball head, there'll be a ton of content going up there. We'll be talking some NBA, of course, in light of the Damian Lillard trade on the radio. We'll be firing up the podcast network in full swing next week. So keep an eye out for all that. For John McKechnie, I am Nick Whalen. We'll talk to you next week.